I've been in software my entire life. So my joke is that I made a company to fix all the problems that I had encountered in the 20 years that I have been building software. I just kind of fell into enterprise by default because I needed a job at the time. My theory was, let's just try everything and see if it works. So now we're almost 5 years in, and I was like, please, just because we tried this thing in the past and it failed, it doesn't mean it can't not succeed now. If you have something that's delivering value, people keep using it.
You're listening to the EnterpriseReady podcast, a show aiming to change the enterprise software narrative from how to sell to enterprises to how to build for enterprises. We'll interview industry experts and enterprise software founders as we break through the jargon, establish a common vernacular, and share the lessons learned from building the world's best enterprise software. Hi, I'm Grant Miller, creator of EnterpriseReady and founder and CEO of Replicated, where we power the world's best enterprise software. The EnterpriseReady podcast is brought to you by Heavybit, a program dedicated to helping startups take their developer products to market. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, or just learn more about enterprise features, find us at enterpriseready.io. Today, we're talking with Edith Harbaugh, the CEO and co-founder of LaunchDarkly, one of the first feature flags as a service companies, where they offer a feature management platform aiming to help teams build better software. We'll get some backstory on how she got into enterprise software and some of the lessons she learned from building advanced enterprise features, including an elaborate role-based access control system that ultimately missed the mark on simplicity. We also discuss the evolution of enterprise sales and how the role of a salesperson, as observed by our nearly 20 years of building software, has really changed. Finally, in one of my favorite moments, we talk about some of the instances where a founder needs to be a little bit shameless, especially dealing with enterprise buyers. All right, Edith, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
It's great to be here in Vegas.
Yeah, it's we're looking out over the Vegas, I guess landscape, not really the strip. So,
well, the beautiful Vegas airport.
Yeah, exactly. To get things started off, I'd love to just have you give the audience a little bit of your background and kind of how you got into enterprise software.
Yeah, so I'm Edith Harbaugh. I'm CEO and co-founder of LaunchDarkly. I graduated with an engineering degree in '99, which was the height of the dot-com boom. And what you did back then was you moved to San Francisco and worked at a .com. So I did something that was even more derivative than that. I worked as a consultant for .coms. So this is back then when you get, 2 Stanford MBAs, they get a couple $1 million for the idea. And then, of course, they had to have engineers to build it. And so I worked for a company called Expedia, which was basically we would come in and would build your product. This was a really viable career until suddenly it was not.
When all the VC money dried up.
Yeah. And that really happened literally within 2 months. Like I remember us all being fully staffed because we were by the hour, and I remember somebody walking down a hall being like, I have no bench. Everybody is out on the field. There's nothing we could give you. And then 2 months later, it's like, hey, we don't have any jobs. Like all these VCs had stopped funding companies. The companies didn't have any money. And the company literally went from listed on the NASDAQ to delisted.
Whoa. So that consulting firm
completely went under. So went public. I think it was public for 2 years and then delisted.
Wow.
It was good they got delisted because, so the name of the company was Expedia with an X.
Right.
Expedia had actually filed a lawsuit that they'd won, and they were in the middle of rebranding, and then it's like, well, we're just going under anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But that was my kind of brutal introduction to, it's really good to actually make money.
Yeah, that's the beauty of enterprise software, right?
Like if somebody's paying you for a unit of value, that's far better than you depending on VCs giving you another dollop for pets.com.
Okay, so out of college, .com boom, went to SF, took this job. So then how did you, what was the path into true enterprise?
It was basically, so I got laid off because they shut down our San Francisco office in the process of shutting the company in, I think, November of 2000. And I was looking around for a new job, and I really wanted to stay in San Francisco.
Sure.
And back then, all of the jobs were down in the valley. Like they were all in San Mateo at best, but really down Palo Alto, Mountain View.
Sure.
I didn't own a car, so I had to borrow a car for an interview. And I went down for the interview, and they offered me a job. And I was like, I don't want to drive down here every day.
Yeah.
So,
or live down there, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was a kid. I was 21. I
Sure.
didn't want to live in Mountain View.
Yeah.
So it was kind of by default. I knew I wanted to stay in San Francisco. And now it's like, well, there's...
Tons of companies.
Back then, there really wasn't much. It was so... a friend of mine had gone to a company called Epicentric. He said, come over, join us. And so I just kind of fell into enterprise by default because I needed a job at the time.
So you joined as an engineer?
I was a software designer, so a spec writer.
Oh, okay.
So I would design all the systems and write up how they would work. It was a portal management system, so I wrote up all of how we would do delegated administration and how we would deploy out and bundle up different systems. A lot of the work really held up. So I worked with Ed Enough, was the founder of the company.
Oh, I love Ed. That's amazing.
Yeah.
He went on to Apogee.
Yeah. Well, he was at Six Apart, so he was.
Right.
So I was kind of the young kid who did the grunt work of actually writing up all the specs.
Oh, funny.
And so we ended up getting I think like 3 separate patents together.
That's awesome. It's funny too that how the network like sort of persists through the rest of your life, right? Like you see it at events and things now still too, right?
Yeah.
Many years later.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because the stuff we wrote, people still use.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What was the software? What did it do?
It was for managing portals. So it's funny, I was at a dinner last night and somebody had worked at Disney and they still use some of our software because it's portal management and you can write portlets, which is basically a microservice you would call it now. Mm-hmm. And Disney wrote their time card management as a portlet. Disney has 50,000 employees just in Florida. So they still use it for that.
But there's no company behind it anymore? Or it got sold? Or
Epicentric was acquired by Vignette.
Okay.
So after I left Vignette, Vignette was acquired by OpenText.
Okay. And then that's still...
OpenText is a public company in Canada.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the staying power of enterprise software with these contracts, I guess, right?
Well, if you have something that's delivering value, people keep using it.
Yeah.
Like I remember I would go on site, like IRS was a customer of Vignette.
Oh, cool.
NASA was a customer. So, I mean, big companies doing real things.
Yeah. And I think the idea for why enterprise software companies persisted through the bust was because they had these large, like non.com customers that actually could continue to pay them, right?
Yeah.
So, unlike the portal, like like web portals, not, like that were building all their business off of this, VC.com money that was kind of circular and it never really left the ecosystem. An enterprise software company selling software to Disney that's been around for a long time, or to NASA that's been around for 50 years. Those are customers that didn't go out of business.
Yeah, I loved visiting the IRS because people there were really happy.
Really?
Yeah, so they knew that they had a job.
Oh, interesting.
Like, and they could plan these 10-year cycles.
Oh, interesting.
So they're like, okay, we're going to do this next year, and then this, like, so they could have a 10-year roadmap. We would go to another customer, Genentech, and everybody was miserable. So, like, maybe we'll do a layoff next quarter, maybe not. I don't really want to plan too far in advance. And IRS people were happy as a clam.
And they know they're not going to get audited.
Yeah. I don't know about that. I loved working with IRS. I loved working with NASA. We had a lot of really big brand name customers using us.
And so at that point, you were writing specs for how the software should work. And it sounds like some of this was like true enterprise functionality, right? It sounded like the thing you were describing was similar to RBAC, right? The sort of
delegated administration.
Yeah.
So actually multiple levels of it. And a lesson I learned the painful way is we built this elaborate system and nobody actually used it. Like, it turned out that people wanted a much simpler RBAC implementation.
Okay.
We'd kind of spun off the deep end of, like, what if you want to, share this component to this person and they want to reshare it to this person, not to this person? And, like, we couldn't even build a UI to express the API at some point.
Yeah, sure.
And then we go on site and people are like, I just want to put the picture of the horse on the website. So like, we'd built all these elaborate rules about who could do what when.
Oh, got it.
That just got in the way, and people are like, I just want to publish this picture.
Yeah. And you're like, all right. So the internal joke became, let them put the horse on the website or something?
Our CEO at the time is like, we built a mission to Mars without a coffee maker, and people just want that goddamn coffee sometimes. Like, we'd over-engineered everything and didn't solve the really simple use cases. And I think that's why Vignette, got subsumed by Blogger and WordPress, who did a really good job at really simple use cases.
Yeah. And over time, WordPress has become a pretty massive enterprise software company, right?
Yeah.
And so it's, that's part of that consumerization of IT movement, right? Create experiences that are easy for people to use. Now, you might need that advanced functionality in there, right? But maybe don't expose it to all of your users and keep it, behind a feature flag maybe or something.
Yeah, well, the lesson I learned was make the simple stuff possible and then also have all these advanced features. But if you don't have the simple stuff...
At the core, yeah.
Yeah. At TripIt, we had a saying which was time to bacon.
Okay.
So TripIt, where I went later, was a mobile app.
Right.
Mobile apps are pretty brutal. Like, people download them. Half of mobile apps that are downloaded don't get opened once.
Wow.
And so if people open their app, you need to give them, we called it bacon, like something good very quickly, or they will never open your app again. So like, we obsessed over what nugget of goodness or strip of bacon can we give people in the shortest possible time so they will reopen the app. I think the same thing holds true to enterprise software now.
Okay.
When I started out in 2001, 2002, people would sign these 3-year enterprise-wide site licenses, and you're just kind of stuck with whatever your CIO had bought. Now, with the rise of SaaS, people sign up. They better like it very quickly, or they're just going to never log in again and let it lapse.
Yeah, that idea that someone signs up and they're using the product, and really they only ever pay a large enterprise-wide license agreement once a bunch of people are using it and they know that the utilization is there and the adoption is there and that the value is there. Then they're coming to you looking for, well, how do I get the rest of my team and get a value and get control, right? But at the start, it's like you got to get those users to just use, get them some bacon, right?
Yeah. Because otherwise, it's like, well, everybody does this. You're looking for bookkeeping software and you're like, hey, I couldn't figure out this one, so let's not go with that. You only have one chance to make a good impression.
That's a great point. And the amount of research people do, like, especially with the ability to just sign up, try things out, and be like, yeah, couldn't figure it out, didn't work, move on, right?
Yeah. So SaaS completely disrupted the way software used to be sold. It would take, 2, 3, 6 months just to get something installed.
Right.
So that's why you had a POC of, hey, let's even try to get this configured on your system. And then once it's installed, it's like, oh, it's good enough.
Bring in the systems integrators to try to hook it up into the rest of your systems, spend a bunch of money there, and then even scheduling that and getting the IT systems all set. Yeah, it's a huge, huge time suck.
Yeah, so what SaaS changed is that the end users are suddenly back in control. Because they didn't have to go to IT and say, hey, can you provision a box for me?
Right. I think that there's a combination there. It's both the introduction of that bottom-up SaaS where you could just sign up and start using it and kind of create this shadow IT thing where no one really even knew you were using it. But then I think there's also a really important piece, which is just the interoperability between applications and sort of the existence of APIs, right? I think Salesforce still charges to access their API. It's not available at their base level plan, which is kind of crazy. Most software companies, modern software companies that are started today, an API is as common as signing up for a user. You can create a token, right?
Salesforce is worth, is going to do 10 billion in revenue, so I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell Mark he's doing it wrong.
Yeah, I think it's just a part of how they've always done it, and it's just been how they, differentiate their products. And Salesforce is also very lucky to be the system of record. So everyone has to integrate into Salesforce.
Yeah.
And that creates gravity for them. And so, if you're another SaaS application, you start up, no one's going to integrate with your stuff. So you need to have an API that and then you need to do some external integrations. You need to make that API as available as possible. You just want everything. You want every integration possible. So I think that's a little different today than it was 20 years ago.
I don't know. I think people sometimes feel like APIs are this magic cure-all.
Sure.
We had an API at TripIt, and the only people who really used it were honestly people who were trying to rip us off. Like we're trying to skin it and make a TripIt replicant.
Yeah, but that was a consumer company, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the reason I think that APIs are important for enterprise software is because it lives in this whole world of other applications. It's not just like you have one app.
Yeah, I think the mistake I've made people make, or maybe not mistake, but the learning is to be very deliberate about what is API-able.
Okay.
Like it's not just like sprinkle APIs on something. It's like, okay, how do people want to integrate with my system? I mean, application program interface. Like what are the functionality they're trying to get in and out of my system? And make that very good, and not just like, hey, let's API this thing over here that nobody cares about.
Sure. It's an interesting perspective to say, like, really think about what should be available in your API, and sort of, I think you have to design it from your perspective to make sure you're thinking about what that use case is. How will someone use this? Because maybe you need to have additional fields that you didn't have initially in order to have like a global locator for them to have a different record and integrate with different systems. You have to think about it globally, not just about your application specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it very well. Like, how does my application interact with the rest of the world?
Right.
Because nobody's a silo anymore.
Exactly, right. And I think that's maybe the difference between that consumer world where like, most of my like consumer apps don't really talk to each other and like I don't share data between them, right? But like my enterprise stuff, it's like if I can hook it up to create a workflow or a pipeline, like I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So then after TripIt, that's when you went to Atlassian, is that right?
My co-founder worked at Atlassian.
Oh, sorry.
My co-founder, John, and I met at Harvey Mudd College in LA.
Right.
And he went to Co-Verity and Atlassian. And we had used feature flags at our respective jobs. Like we used them heavily at TripIt.
Oh, interesting. So you both had been using feature flags independently and stayed in touch about this concept.
Well, we stayed in touch because we were friends.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it wasn't like...
Yeah, okay. It wasn't feature flags were probably together all the time.
We were friends. Like, we went on camping trips, we went to Coachella. It's funny, we were working on another idea around static analysis, which he'd gotten his PhD in. So I was talking to a lot of developers about static analysis, and I kind of realized that I didn't think there was a big enough market for us to do a company. But I had been talking to all these developers, and they were all talking about how they liked feature flags, and they're like, why do we have to keep rebuilding the same system that we had at our prior job? Like LinkedIn had a pretty mature system. People would leave LinkedIn. People would say, hey, why are we rebuilding this?
Sure.
And at TripIt, we had our own internal system. Because we had 10 million users, we didn't want to launch a feature to all 10 million.
Right.
So we would do a lot of stuff where we would launch it off and then turn it on for selective users who were friendly, who we knew would give us good feedback. And then we would do percentage rollouts. And also, if something went bad in the field, we could just shut it off. So we used it extensively. John had used it at Atlassian. And I said, John, I think we should build a system to do this. And John said, yes.
Okay.
Well, because there was two questions. It's like, is there a market, and could John build it? And
Sure.
John's like, I think I could build this. I'm like, great. I think there's a market.
Your other half is, I think there's a market.
Yeah, well, because static analysis it was a hard road.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, some people are making a success out of it, but I didn't think it was a big enough market for us to really go after.
But your thesis was that everyone's going to build software, and so they're going to need this as a way to do a modern deployment pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, the joke is, so I'd worked at Monster, the job
Sure.
site, and even at the time I was frustrated that there wasn't a tool like LaunchDarkly.
Okay.
So my old boss, Ann Dwayne, says, Edith, you always used to complain that we had to build this in-house, so you finally just made a company.
You hated this problem so much inside of all these companies you worked at, you had to just solve it for everyone.
Yeah, because I remember I was like Googling, like, why can't we just buy this?
Yeah. Well, good thing you couldn't.
Well, it just seems so obvious in hindsight.
And so you and John were discussing this idea, and this is what, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah, this was June of 2014.
Okay. And so you were talking about it, said, we think this is a business. Just the two of you to start?
It was the two of us. He was at Atlassian, so at this point, Kerr had bought TripIt.
Okay.
So I had also gotten all this enterprise experience from Concur.
Sure.
So TripIt was kind of the classic consumer mobile app, and Concur bought it for a good price. I think it was around $100 million.
Nice.
And one of the reasons they bought it is I joined TripIt to start up their TripIt for Business.
Okay, cool.
Which was us selling services to businesses, and that got Concur's attention. But before they saw us as this cute app, they're like, oh, they're going after our core market of business. And so they acquired us.
Cool.
So I was a part of why we got acquired.
And at this point, you were doing product or engineering at TripIt?
I had been a product manager there.
Right.
And then Concur acquired us. And Concur is brilliant at enterprise sales.
Really?
I mean, they are a juggernaut. They got bought for $8 billion by SAP.
Right.
Because they are very, very, very good at enterprise sales.
And what makes them so good?
They really know their buyer.
Mm.
So they sell to CFOs, and they have a very good pitch to CFOs, and their entire sales force goes and tells the CFO, this is why you should buy Concur. And it becomes this inevitable thing. People buy Concur because other people buy Concur.
Yeah. It's like you don't get fired for buying Concur, right?
Yeah, and it just becomes a self-reinforcing thing.
I think I had to use it when I joined a bigger company 5 or 6 years ago. I wasn't a big fan.
Yeah, so I said they were very good at enterprise sales.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they know their buyer, which is the CFO.
Yeah.
The users, not so happy.
Right. And that feels like it's becoming less common, but it's still fairly common in the enterprise software world, right? Is that end users don't have as much of a say. Probably far less true in the developer tool world, where I think end users really do have a lot of say. But a CFO picks a technology because it
auditable,
great reporting, all these other things, and the end user experience is an afterthought half the time.
Yeah, I mean, look at Salesforce.
Right.
I mean, they sell to the VP of sales, not to the ICs.
Right. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Salesforce experience. I still remember when I joined that larger company, we used Salesforce, I was staring at a dashboard for about 3 or 4 months, and the sales reps, I was in product, the sales reps were telling me they were selling more of this product that I was building, and I couldn't. I was like, why is the dashboard, why are we not seeing any sales here? Turns out there's like a refresh inside of the dashboard. It's not like, no, when I refresh the page, is it supposed to refresh? No, like you have to go to this like special button and hit refresh.
Yeah, Salesforce, like I said, they make a ton of money, but their user experience is very dated.
Yeah. Lightning is better from what I hear, but it's ultimately, I think it just comes down to the fact that there's an inefficient market in enterprise software, right? And this is why you can have huge commissions as well.
Well, it's inefficient or efficient depending on how you look at it.
Okay. How is it efficient?
They're very efficient at selling to their buyer, which is the VP sales.
Sure. It is efficient from Salesforce perspective. It is inefficient from like a market perspective, in my opinion.
Oh, that the market would have better.
Yeah. Well, so, I guess I also believe that like any market with like large commissions is inefficient.
Ah, interesting.
And that's just like a general thesis because it's like, if you think about like brokerage, right?
Yeah.
20, 30 years ago, before information was freely available, stockbrokers and bonds brokers like had information that other people didn't have. And so they were able to create this spread. Yep. And that spread is commission, right? Yeah. And so I think like you see the same thing as there's a huge information asymmetry in inefficient markets. As the information becomes more symmetrical, commissions shrink, like the bid ask gets closer, and you end up with not needing huge commissions. And so I think that's a sign, but that's just like a random aside.
Yeah, I'll random your random aside.
Great.
My sister lives in New York, and the idea of broker commissions on apartments, just I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
So when she moves, she has to pay 2 months rent to a broker.
It's just the market there, right? Like everybody does it, and think it kind of persists itself, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's laws, right? Like in California, you have to be a real estate broker, and you have to do 2 years of studying and have all these hours, and then they end up persisting these entrenched systems. I'm
gonna stand up for commissions.
Okay, let's hear it.
And sales.
Yeah, great.
So I'll say so I had a mix of experience. Like I'd worked at big enterprisey companies like Vignette. Like Vignette, we did not take deals under $500,000 just because it wasn't worth the cost of sales.
Sure.
Because we had to do a POC, you had to send people on site, and then SaaS came along and changed everything.
Yep.
And then I was also at Concur, but even then, you had salespeople.
Sure.
Atlassian famously does not have salespeople.
Right. I say, air quotes.
Yeah. Well, so when we started LaunchDarkly, John and I had this idea that we would be this really bottoms-up, feature flags for all, self-serve thing.
I think every technical founder has this dream about their software company. we did it replicated too.
It just and we made this really nice self-serve checkout path.
Oh, cool. Integrated with Stripe or something. Or
Yeah, it was all ready to go. And then our first big customer, who, by the way, was sat next to me at our dinner last night, which was awesome.
Oh, funny.
He wanted a contract because he worked at a big public company and they needed a year contract and they didn't want to do self-serve. And I kept saying, like, hey, just put in your credit card.
Right.
Like,
easy.
No, and he's like, no, the way our company works is it needs to go through legal and security and procurement. And I'm like, just put in the credit card. He's like, no, we need a year contract. So that was my brutal introduction to, we were actually enterprise sales.
Yeah.
And that you need a salesperson a lot of times to actually help you navigate your own bureaucracy.
Yeah, point taken. And I'd say that potentially the commissions can also be attributed to the fact that these are not commodities that are being sold. And so the commoditization of technology would also force down prices and force down commissions. But one like software solution versus another, they're not interchangeable. They're not wire compliant. Some has different features, different security models, different things. And so then in that case, a complex sale in a complex application could, I guess, create the need for larger commissions. So,
well, even beyond that, like our own experience, so we'll have a champion at a company and they're like, I love this. Can you come and give a demo to the rest of my team and get them on board?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's a salesperson.
Sure.
And the hilarious thing is, so we sell to developers. And so they'll say like, hey, we need somebody to come on site and give a demo and work with procurement, but not a salesperson. I'm like, because we hate salesperson. I'm like, but that's a salesperson. Like, we'll call it another name, but like...
Yeah, that's what they do.
They're like, can you help send somebody on site to help us understand your software and see the value and convince other people and work with my purchasing? And I'm like...
That you just described a salesperson.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny.
So I think the word salesperson has gotten a really bad rap back from the early days I talked about in like 2001, where you couldn't see the software for 6 months. So they were kind of flim-flam, PowerPoint, chicanery, for lack of a better word.
That's interesting. So your perspective there is that the role of the salesperson has changed. I'm guessing, so it's actually an interesting question. In your sales, so I think about this, I differentiate between companies sometimes in the enterprise software world as sign up or contact us, right? As what's the main call to action on your website?
So we're still doing a hybrid because we sell to developers.
Okay.
And some developers are just allergic to salespeople.
Yeah.
They're like, just leave me alone. I will put in the credit card.
Yeah.
And others are like, hey, please, I want a rep. And then they'll write again, like, the rep hasn't gotten back to me quickly enough. Like, please, I want a rep. And the nice thing is people love our salespeople. I mean, not to brag too much about LaunchDarkly, but
No, go ahead.
they see us as a trusted advisor. Like, we went to New Zealand to visit customers. The customer had a gift for our salesperson.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. Like, so he's like, hey, I know, so he got him a really nice New Zealand gin.
Oh, cool.
Because he said, thank you so much. You've helped me so much. Here's a present.
That's awesome.
Which is not how people think about salespeople.
Right.
Or like, we closed a deal with another big bank in Australia, and I'm the CEO. So I had just literally signed the contract, and I got an email from the customer. Your salesperson was amazing. He helped us so much. We're really happy. Looking forward to working with you more.
That's great.
Yeah. So I think salespeople have been tarred with this awful image of pushy people instead of, hey, this is somebody who can help you.
Yeah. And I think that's what gives us as technical founders a bad taste for sales. You're right. Maybe it's just it's a sign of the maturing model of like, now we can show you the software faster. We can help you understand. We're actually like trying to communicate value and communicate like how this fits into the rest of your tools and how this should work. And there's education. So yeah, I mean, the role of a salesperson.
It's not to trick you.
Right.
It's not to trick you. It's not to hoodwink you. It's not to bamboozle you. Because, people can cancel a contract at any time.
Sure.
And we have 140% retention because we're like, we will sell you good things that you will like.
Yeah. And so you made this transition to you first had it as a sign up flow and you could pay with a credit card and your first customer wanted a contract. So did you go off and hire a salesperson or did you do the early sales yourselves?
I did all the early sales myself. I'd like to say it was from some noble urge, but I kept thinking they were one-offs.
Funny.
And then I realized that I was the bottleneck.
Okay.
Because literally people would be like, we're ready to sign. Where is the order form? And I'm the founder. And you know how it is. You're doing like
a million things. Yeah.
Somebody's like, I'm really ready to pay you money. Where is this order form? And so that's when we hired our first salesperson.
Okay. So then how far into the company's life cycle was that?
It was about 2 years in.
Okay.
So I did basically the first $1 million in sales. I became the bottleneck. We hired somebody.
And so at this point you had raised how much money?
We'd done our seed, so we'd done a $2.6 million seed round. We'd been selling for about a year. So it took us a year to basically build anything sellable.
Okay.
I mean, we had people using it, but it was about a year until anybody would really pay us money for it.
So you were bringing on these early customers, getting them to like try it out and use it and give you feedback. And then eventually you felt like you had something that you could charge for and people would pay you for. And you were selling those deals for the next year.
Yeah.
And then got it up to about $1 million and realized like...
I'm the bottleneck.
Yeah. What did the team structure look like at that point? Was there mainly engineering? Was there product? Was there marketing?
We were an 8-person company.
You're an 8-person company. Okay.
So like the department thing sounds a little bit grand.
Well, I mean, so I think about it as like, did you have someone who was responsible for marketing?
Yeah. So the joke is I was our first AE and SDR.
Sure.
John Kodamal, my co-founder, was our CTO and SE.
Okay, sure.
So like the early deals, like you got us.
Absolutely.
Like whether you liked it or not.
Yeah.
And it's really fun now because now we have over 500 customers, but the early ones, they know me and John and I know them. Like we talk to them.
Yeah.
We then hired 2 engineers. We hired marketing very early. So a designer was our 5th hire. Marketing was our 6th. And I actually credit Tom Drummond.
Oh, from Heavybit.
Yeah. I'm a good marketer.
Sure.
And I kept thinking I could just keep doing it. And he's like, Edith, you need to scale to millions of dollars. You're the CEO and doing a lot of things. You need to hire somebody to do this full time. And except for Tom said this far more harshly with more British swear words in it. He's like, you got to scale.
Yeah.
So a marketer was our 6th hire. And I think that was really smart. People sometimes say, oh, I'm going to wait till my A and then hire marketing. Mm-hmm. Those companies usually don't get an A.
Yeah, I mean, somebody has to do the marketing, right? Either it's going to be you're doing it and you're putting all this effort into it, or you have to hire it in order to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to do it off the side of my desk. It's like, no, somebody just needs to do this all the time.
Yeah. And so who was really doing product at that point?
Kodamal.
Okay.
Co-founder.
So John was doing both CTO, product, and then sales engineering.
Yeah, I mean, and support, and the joke was chief T-shirt officer.
Okay, so he had some marketing responsibilities himself.
Oh, you know how it is. I mean, everybody did everything.
So you hired someone in the marketing before you had sales. Did that marketing person focus on like sales enablement collateral stuff, or what was there?
A lot of content marketing.
Okay.
That was what was working for us. We doubled down on it.
Sure. I think that's a great strategy early on. So content marketing around just...
feature flags.
Great.
We realized that there wasn't a lot of good technical content out there around feature flags, which was really good for us because we could put out a lot of content very quickly, SEO for it.
Sure. And who was writing the content?
Everybody.
Okay.
Like, I wrote a lot of early posts. I would track how they were doing. I could see that we were doing well on Google. I knew that we would start to have competitors, so I said we need to double down and write more content. So as part of our weekly sprints, because we're an engineering company, everybody had a blog post.
Oh, wow. Everybody had a blog post every week.
Well, we figured out who was a better writer, and if you were not a good writer, you
got different tasks.
Yeah. Our best writer was our lead engineer, Patrick Kading. Some of his blog posts are still just gold.
That's great.
So we would, lavish him with praise and say, like, please write more.
Yeah.
For a while, every time a new employee joined, we made him write a blog post.
Okay.
And this was our way of sussing out, like, A, was content.
Yeah.
Like, so we said, it doesn't have to be fancy, just after your first week, write a blog post, and we could suss out, like, hey, are you a decent writer? Should we encourage you to write more?
Sure, okay.
And It wasn't a choice at the beginning whether or not you wrote the first week post.
You needed content and you wanted to know who was good. Okay, I love that.
And then as time went by, I mean, now we're 70 people. We don't make people write blog posts anymore. But, in the early days, you're just like, you're all rowing in the boat together.
Yeah.
In the early days, everybody answered support tickets.
Right.
It's like, this is what we do.
No other option, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you had someone doing marketing, kind of helping facilitate a lot of this content marketing, but were they also doing kind of lead gen? I'm sure you have all these functions today. So if you think about like the maturity level, what were some of the functions that were fairly mature early on, and then that were actually really drivers?
We were just experimenting with everything. My theory was, let's just try everything and see if it works. We tried paid advertising. It didn't work at all for us just because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to search for a feature flag management system. It's just not something people do.
Yeah. Turns out when you're creating a category, it's hard to get people to search for that thing.
Yeah. So my theory was, let's just systematically work through every technique I knew from prior jobs and see what sticks. We tried outbound email. It didn't work. Now, 3 years later, we do outbound email and it's very successful, but back then it did not work.
Oh, interesting. It's also an important piece, which is like, it's not just even in marketing, it's like everywhere. You have to try things again. You can't, just because it failed once.
That's what I tell the team. I'm like, so now we're almost 5 years in, and I was like, please, just because we tried this thing in the past and it failed, it doesn't mean it can't not succeed now.
Right. I have the same thing with food, with like the foods I didn't like when I was younger. I like make sure I'd retry them, every 5 years or something to see if they're better now.
Yeah.
And some things are. I now love dim sum.
Broccoli.
Oh, okay. See, there you go.
There's this theory, this is a digression, that your taste buds change as you get older.
Oh.
Like when you're young, you love sweets. Like I remember like eating Starburst.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And Pixie Sticks.
Oh, yeah.
And Skittles. And now it just seems way too sweet.
Yeah, that's funny.
But like when you get older, your taste buds react more to bitter.
I just thought that I was maturing and my palate was getting more refined.
Well, literally.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So the thing about marketing is also what worked at one company can get saturated. Like at TripIt, we tried to do content marketing and it was just an utter flop because people have been writing about travel since Marco Polo.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Like every newspaper has travel section. People love writing about their vacation. There is so much travel content out there.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's a great point.
Versus technical content, there's just not a ton out there.
Yeah, and it changes. It's like, these new technologies every time change the game. And it's like, well, how you did continuous deployment, or how you did deployments changed when you moved to containers, when you moved to serverless. Like all these things change. So that's a great point.
Yeah, so there's a real hunger for good technical content.
Yeah.
But it's harder. Like, there's so many content factories out there that will pump out listicles for you, but not good technical content.
Yeah.
Like, they'll pump out, a listicle about, like, top 10 ways to save money on your credit card bill.
Right.
Everybody has credit card bills. But, like, if somebody wants to write, how to
deploy your enterprise software in an air-gapped environment. It's like a pretty hard listicle to write.
You can't ship that off to like some freelance writer.
Yeah. Which puts a lot of responsibility on your team because not only they have to develop it and deliver it and support it and sell it, but they have to like also describe it and write it. So there's a lot. It's a big challenge, I think.
It's a big challenge, but also a big advantage. Like, so the early days of selling, I remember we hired salespeople and they were pretty green. And engineers can be pretty tough audiences.
Yeah, that's true.
And they would get kind of beat up in sales calls. And I would say, look, you are the expert. They were looking to you for advice. They're asking you the tough questions because they are putting their jobs on the line to buy you.
Right.
Literally. Like, if they buy our solution and we go down, they get fired.
Yep.
And so now I think that really helped our salespeople because now they act like trusted advisors.
And they have to know it. You can't go in there and sound foolish and be trusted.
Yeah.
So you have to get the knowledge too.
Yeah. But I mean, so that's why, I'm like, you are the advisor on how to use feature flags correctly.
Yeah. And ultimately, I'm guessing what happens is they just end up hearing things your team has been saying, or you say, or John says, or someone, like, they're just repeating the things that they've heard before. And I think you can put put together a lot of knowledge from just like being around this conversation and start to really understand these things, and then have a very intelligent conversation with someone by just delivering what experts like, because this is all you've thought about for the last like 6 years, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so your insights, the things that just I'm sure you randomly say in the office, or what happens in some Slack channel, is like the most advanced thought anyone's had about feature flagging. And so that like permeates the rest of the company, and they can distribute that out to the rest of the world.
Yeah. So in the early days, we all needed to be in the same place. So we went through Heavybit. And when we've hired our first salesperson, one of our interviews was you had to come eat lunch with us. Because we all ate lunch together every day. Like we would all like file down, and you've been to Heavybit.
Yeah, of course.
Get our lunches, and we'd sit together. And so part of the interview was you had to come in and get lunch with us. And like, because we're like, hey, you don't have to eat lunch with us every day. Like, we get it if you have doctor appointment or just want to go to the gym. But like,
sure, we do this.
Yeah. And we had a daily stand-up with everybody in the company. So it wasn't just engineers. It was literally marketing, design, me, and our salesperson would, stand up and say, hey, here's our blockers. Here's what's happening. So it was really effective at indoctrinating the sales team or salesperson.
Sure.
Into like, hey, this is how an engineering company runs.
And so that way even that, because that's the context through which your product is even being sold. So exposing them to, this sort of like daily stand-up, which is a ritual that many software companies that you're selling to are doing, gives them an even deeper connection to that sale.
This is how a weekly sprint works.
Yeah.
Because then when a customer or prospect says, hey, I need to wait for the right sprint to integrate this.
You know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, okay, sure. How long are your sprints?
Yeah.
You can ask the right question.
Yeah. The other thing I told the team was, we were really tight-knit. I said, look, I know a lot of engineering-led companies hate their salespeople. They look at them as these idiots out in the field. We are not going to succeed unless we say this is our face in the field, closest to the customer, getting feedback and bringing it back to us.
That's great. And that's been true for your salespeople. That's amazing.
Yeah, they're the people who are out in the field talking to prospects. They're the ones who are like, hey, that feature that we think is really cool, nobody cares about. This feature we didn't think anybody want, everybody asked for. So we have to treat our salespeople like they're part of the team, which seems dead obvious, but I've seen so many tech companies think that, hey, we could just like spin up a sales office over there and we'll build our product over here and everything's going to be fine.
Yes, that's great. So even though you didn't want to be sales heavy when you first started the company, once you kind of realized it was important, you really embraced it and sort of made it a core part of your culture. And really, you probably softened the sales like role in terms of you're not hiring the like finger gun, slick back Lamborghini driver. These are people that understand technology and appreciate and love technology as well. Yeah.
So Jason Lemkin gave a great talk at Heavybit. I still refer people to it. And one of his rules about selling to technical people in the early days is, would your team buy from this person?
Right.
And if not,
don't hire them.
Yeah, because they're going to go sell to technical people like you.
Yeah, it's very true. Still, I think you still need a different persona in sales than the engineering persona. You need someone who's like, I always say like you have to be just like slightly shameless.
Yeah.
Like you and I as like founders are like slightly shameless because...
Oh, I saw you handing out replicated hoodies at when you went places where you should have been handing out replicated hoodies.
Yeah, exactly. Like
I'm not going to say where it is, but...
Yeah, everywhere, basically. I've got like a bag of 80 of them over here.
You had your then girlfriend like handing them out too.
Like, in Hawaii somewhere. She's my wife now. So
then girlfriend.
So that's why she gets to enjoy the life of replicated. But that's it. You have to be somewhat shameless in order to expect that someone doesn't mind you calling again, or like doesn't mind you sending another email or saying like, because for me the perspective is always, I know that the software that our team builds is so great and it's going to be so helpful that you're like, I know you're going to love it once you start using it.
Yeah.
Right.
I believe that like our net promoter score is in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
I know that people get a lot of value out of it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, I know this is going to help you.
Yeah. But you just like have to have that like little bit of like, you're a little shameless because you're not this purist around like how people should operate or what you want the world to be like. You're like, I want the world to be better and use the best software possible.
Yeah, that was a brutal lesson for me. So I'd been an engineer, I'd been a product manager, I'd managed salespeople, But to go from managing salespeople to being the salesperson, I had to get much better at rejection.
Oh, yeah.
Like a 50% win rate is high.
That's really high, yeah.
Versus if you're an engineer, like if 50% of your code doesn't ship, you're like, something has gone dramatically wrong.
Yeah. I think about it as we've never lost a deal. They're just delayed.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, nothing is ever closed loss. It's just,
Exactly.
It's just closed not now.
It's just not now, right? Yeah, we'll get them someday.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's like, and it's true. Like we do feature flag management.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are like, not right now, and then they'll come back a year later, and be like, now.
Yeah. And then they want it even more because they realize like they try to build their own version and they're like, got all this stuff and it's a big pain and no one knows what to do with it anymore. And so like, oh, just give us the thing.
Yeah. So something we did along those lines is a lot of what we were doing is trying to convince people that feature flagging was a better way to build software.
Sure.
So we explicitly published how to build your own system.
Okay.
With the theory that if people try to go build their own system, they would get sick of it and eventually come to us.
Perfect.
And because it's like, you're engineers. We know that you could build this if you wanted to.
It's so true. I refer to this YouTube video that I watched. I was going to build a huge wood fence outside of the replicated office, like literally like a 40-foot fence that's like 6 feet high. And I was like, I'll just like watch a YouTube video and figure out how to do it. And I watched like a 20-minute YouTube video of this guy like using this like huge thing to dig out like the fence post holes and like all this concrete and like how he's measuring everything. And I was like, and then at the end it was like LA fence building, and I was like, just called that guy. I was like, I need you to build me that fence I saw on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so it's like perfect, right? Like, turns out I can't do any of these things that you just did. So
yeah,
thank you for showing me how the sausage is made because it's really complex.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our thing is always, again, we sell to developers, we sell to engineers. It's like, I know you could build this. Here's how to build this. Do you want to build this?
Right. Is this what you want to spend your time doing?
Yeah. There's better ways to spend your time. And that gets back to effective selling is, if you try to tell engineers they can't do something, which is or that they're not smart enough to do it, they get pissed off and they'll go try to do it just to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
Like if you're like, oh, this is too complicated, you'll never figure it out. They're like, screw you, vendor, I'm going to go build this.
Yeah. It's funny. I always say, I think there's no, especially like our customers too, right? Or like these great, amazing, developer tools and DevOps companies. I'm like, every one of them could build the things that we've built. It's when I talk to VCs and they're like, well, could somebody else build this? I'm like, somebody else could build every piece of software. I was like, if you've invested in a company because you thought like that's the only team that could build the software, you're an idiot.
Oh, it's like the famous quote about Dropbox. When Dropbox launched on Hacker News, somebody's like, well, this is just a file share.
Yeah, you could do this with these 7 steps in like, Vim or something. You're like, well, yeah, that's not really the point, right? But it's just like, I don't know. I think that especially today, because so much software is like based on open source and you're really pulling off of all these other components in the world, like rarely is there like a truly net new crazy thing. Even like all the AI stuff is like, well, it's just like
algorithms.
TensorFlow underneath the hood, right? It's like, so it's hard to, in my opinion, to really have something that's so differentiated.
What we sell at LaunchDarkly is reliability.
Yeah.
So I go talk to people that have the homegrown systems. Like I heard this horror story from somebody in New York where it's like, well, we have this homegrown system to do our feature flagging. The caches don't clear correctly. So like he still gets calls at 3 a.m. because like somebody turned a feature flag off and the cache didn't clear. And like it's all messed up.
Yeah.
I'm like, we sell you a system that will work. Turns
out cache expiration, one of the hardest problems in software, right?
Oh, there's only 3 hard problems.
Right. That's one of them, though.
There's 2, caching, naming, and off by 1.
Yeah, off by 1 errors.
Yeah. Well, Grant, it was really nice to talk with you.
Edith, this is so great. I will have you on again sometime. We're going to go even deeper into some enterprise software stuff. This has been amazing.
I've been in software my entire life. So my joke is that I made a company to fix all the problems that I had encountered in the 20 years that I have been building software.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Just get to build the things that have always annoyed you a little bit and make
no, more than a little bit.
Yeah.
Like the things that have made me like so frustrated when I was an engineer or product manager.
That's, I think, what makes really great product people is that there's just a lot of, you notice all the little things that could be better. And you're like, well, why don't we just make it better, right?
And that's the best part. I said earlier, NPS is really high. I read the NPS surveys and people say, hey, this changed my life for the better. That feels really good.
That's all we have time for today. If you're interested in being a guest on this show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, or just to learn more about enterprise features, find us at EnterpriseReady.io. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com to check out the library. It's packed with amazing talks on sales, marketing, product, and general management from founders of developer tools companies and other industry leaders.